killing, serious bodily or mental harm, conditions of life calculated to destroy, preventing births, taking the children. Since 1948, any one of these acts committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, in whole or in part, has had a name in the international law, Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, genocide. But the convention has a flaw the Rohingya exposed. Someone has to bring the case. In 2017, Myanmar's military swept through Rakhine State. By the UN's count, thousands killed, hundreds of villages burned, more than 700,000 people driven into Bangladesh. So, is it recognized as genocide? In 2018, a UN fact-finding mission found genocidal intent and called for Myanmar's generals to be prosecuted. In 2022, the United States formally declared it a genocide. But no court had ruled. The Gambia did. A West African nation of 2 million, no border with Myanmar, no citizens harmed, filed at the International Court of Justice in November 2019, arguing the convention makes genocide every signatory's business. 7 years later, in January 2026, the court finally heard the case in full. The first binding judgment on this genocide is now being written. Every genocide has a mechanism, one that prepares the ground decades ahead of the violence.
Gross violations of the human rights of the Rohingya seems a textbook example of ethnic cleansing.
Sometimes the mechanism is a story about blood, about purity, about who belongs and who does not. At other times, it takes the form of the paperwork, the documentation and bureaucracy of belonging.
Denying citizenship should be considered a warning sign that genocide is more likely in that place.
This is a citizenship card in Myanmar. It's proof you have rights, a place in the system. Without it, you're not just undocumented. You're locked out of the protections that make a person visible to the state.
The earliest signs of the genocide against Rohingyas is a pattern, a recognizable pattern of destruction or erasure of Rohingya identity as an ethnic group.
In 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya Muslims were driven from Myanmar. At least 6,700 people were killed in the first month of the military crackdown, while hundreds of villages were burned across Rakhine State. Salima is one person, a single piece of data in a system that was built long before the bomb that killed her husband. The question here is not simply what happened, but how it became possible. How can a government erase a people, legally, systemically, before anyone raises a hand to stop it?
My grandfather's younger brother was deputy commander in charge of the entire Western Myanmar, where Rohingyas have ancestral root.
Rakhine State is on the western edge of Myanmar, a narrow strip of land between the Arakan Mountains and the sea.
You can go back 2 millennia, and you find the ancestors of the current Rohingya community are present on those lands. They're an indigenous community in Myanmar.
The court in the ancient capital of Morocco issued coins inscribed with both Buddhist and Islamic symbols. Muslim communities have been documented in the Arakan region since at least the 15th century during the Morocco period. The British colonial census of 1891 documented them. When Burma became an independent nation, the Rohingya were part of it.
They were recognized as full and equal citizens of, at the time, what is called the Union of Burma in 1948, when we became independent from colonial Britain.
Under the Citizenship Act, many Rohingya were able to obtain citizenship, vote, and take part in public life. While the law did not explicitly name them as an official indigenous race, it provided a legal pathway that, in practice, recognized them as part of the country.
The Myanmar government over many decades has used history as a central plank of its citizenship laws. And then this is fundamentally important to how citizenship is understood in Myanmar.
Those who command power in Myanmar don't see the Rohingya as their equals in any way. To the contrary, they think that they don't belong and shouldn't be in Myanmar.
The Rohingya were increasingly treated outside the category of Burma's recognized national races, and the state's evolving definition of citizenship increasingly excluded them. When General Ne Win seized power in 1962, he didn't just end democracy, he began redefining who counted as Burmese. In practice, the government centralized power and promoted a Burman Buddhist national identity, marginalizing many ethnic and religious minorities. A new constitution and citizenship framework placed the Rohingya outside the nation's recognized races.
So they use this anti-immigration campaign to kick out close to 200,000 Rohingyas from across the Arakan or Rakhine state into Bangladesh.
Then, in 1982, Ne Win's government passed the Burma Citizenship Law. It defines citizenship as being a member of one of the 135 recognized national races. The government considered these to be indigenous to Burma before the British occupation began in 1824.
So by portraying the Rohingya as not part of Myanmar's political fabric before the colonial period, by denying that history, it allows the perpetrators to present the Rohingya as not legitimately entitled to citizenship. And that's what's enabled other crimes against them.
In the years that followed, citizenship became color-coded. Pink for full citizens, blue for associate citizens, and green for naturalized citizens. Many Rohingya found themselves outside the system altogether. They were later offered national verification cards instead that recognized their presence, but not their citizenship.
They were made aliens on their own native land.
In 1995, the Myanmar government introduced a new document, the Temporary Registration Card. It became known as the White Card. It documented Rohingya residents as temporary card holders, but was not proof of citizenship.
Rohingya are pretty jaded by the processes of new identity cards being given to them every couple of years.
For about 20 years, the Rohingya only had this so-called White Card. Then technology changed things.
This was a community that didn't have free press for 50 years. They had access to smartphones and social media.
In June 2012, communal violence spread across Rakhine State and flared again in October.
Myanmar military outsourced the persecution and direct violence against their targeted population, Rohingya, who have been subject to the slow-burning genocidal policies of Myanmar military, to local Rakhine Buddhist vigilantes.
Buddhist mobs, in many areas acting alongside or in the presence of state security forces, attacked Rohingya neighborhoods. Homes were burned, people were killed, mosques were destroyed.
State media was using incredibly incendiary language, incredibly aggressive language when it was talking about communities like the Rohingya. And it was encouraging people to believe that there was a legitimate threat to the country's political fabric.
Approximately 140,000 Rohingya were displaced from their homes and moved into camps across Rakhine State.
Rohingya halata in the area, Mara hoy the Highland in the area, Rohingya halata. Rohingya halatan hole in the area, Dorja Rohingya halata in the area. Bune besar gordi hoy besar gan faidiri. Ana shasa na, jana zaim mudiri. Ona kehne la madad kar lena desha zaim.
I made a complaint to Facebook that there was a breach of their community standards in a video that was been circulated by the activist monk Waratu.
Que se passe-t-il si on se marie avec des musulmans?
Notre religion va disparaître.
Donc vous allez vous marier avec un alcoolique ou un musulman?
Avec un alcoolique.
Un chien galeux ou un musulman?
Avec un chien galeux.
Vous choisissez quoi?
On choisit le chien.
Oui, choisis le chien.
But we know that the ultranationalist Buddhists have their own Facebooks and really inciting a lot of violence and a lot of hatred against the Rohingya or other ethnic minorities.
By then, the old language of exclusion had established a pattern. It was no longer just in state media or official speeches. It was in people's phones. International agencies documented conditions inside the camps in detail. Rohingya camp residents were not permitted to leave without authorization.
Life on their own ancestral land was like living in an open-air prison.
On the 28th of February 2014, the Burmese government ordered Doctors Without Borders to seize all its activities in the country. A few days later, the government partly reversed its decision and allowed the organization to resume operations elsewhere in Myanmar, but not in Rakhine State. A whole generation of children grew up inside camps, educated wherever space could be salvaged. And in 2015, the white cards were revoked completely. More than 700,000 people lost the only document that had recognized their presence, however inadequately.
Rohingya identity, names, culture, their presence have been airbrushed out of Myanmar people's consciousness.
By August 2017, the machinery was already in place. The laws had been written, rights had been stripped away, the population had been isolated. But then, on the 25th of August, a group calling itself the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA, attacked around 30 police outposts in northern Rakhine State.
Young Rohingya men, angry, desperate, caged in, under siege, decided to strike back with whatever they had.
Following these attacks, Myanmar's military launched what it called clearance operations. The attacks on the police outposts alone didn't trigger the military's response. They set in motion a mechanism that had been decades in the building.
I think here you see the two critical ingredients for many genocides, which is war plus ethnic nationalism.
What followed was not confined to the sites of the attacks. One village illustrates the point. Tula Toli. On the 30th of August 2017, 5 days after the ARSA attacks, soldiers and armed civilians surrounded the village.
According to Shofi and other researchers, about 1,000 Rohingya men, women, and children were slaughtered in that village called Tula Tuli by Myanmar military with the support of Rakhine vigilantes.
In the following weeks, satellite imagery showed the scale of destruction. Across northern Rakhine State, more than 350 villages were partially or completely destroyed. Doctors Without Borders conducted surveys in the refugee camps in Bangladesh and estimated that at least 6,700 Rohingya were killed in the first month of the military operations. It also said that this figure was probably an underestimate, given the difficulty of reaching survivors across such a large affected area. By late October 2017, more than 640,000 Rohingya refugees had crossed into Bangladesh. He had survived the genocide, but a few months later, the state jailed him for 2 years for crossing the border back into his own country. Independent investigators said that even if Rohingya refugees survived in Bangladesh and then tried to return, they'd find that the conditions necessary for survival in Myanmar had been systemically removed.
What happened in Myanmar was a planned campaign to forcibly remove a Muslim minority, the Rohingya community, from the country. It's as simple as that.
In 2018, a UN fact-finding mission to Myanmar concluded its investigation. It said that, quote, "There is sufficient information to warrant the investigation and prosecution of senior officials in the Tatmadaw chain of command so that a competent court can determine their liability for genocide." In 2019, the Gambia brought a case against Myanmar before the International Court of Justice, arguing that Myanmar had violated the Genocide Convention. In January 2020, the court ordered provisional measures, which required Myanmar to protect the Rohingya from further harm and to preserve evidence. The United States government formally determined in 2022 that Myanmar's military had committed genocide against the Rohingya. 2 years later, the prosecutor at the International Criminal Court requested an arrest warrant for Senior General Min Aung Hlaing on charges of crimes against humanity. And in early 2026, ICC merits hearings advanced, with the Gambia arguing that discriminatory laws, organized hate speech, and the military's operational conduct formed a coordinated intent to destroy the Rohingya as an ethnic group. Satellite imagery analysis documented what was happening to the land the Rohingya had been driven from.
The Rohingya survivors remain in limbo. Their identity remains, their legal standing remains fragile, and their lives remain vulnerable.
7 years after the military attacks, the same pattern returned, this time in a different guise.
মুসলমানৰ ৰাস্তা গলি গলি বুংগাৰাইতো হয়ে মুসলমানৰ ৰাস্তা গলি গলি গাড়া গাড়া তিয়াই তিয়াই গম্ম লৈ যাইতো হয়ে বুজিব মোৰ তারা হজ্জা দিয়ে তো মারি ফেলে দেন হদ্দেরি আরার মারি ফেলে দে তারার বেগুন আসল লয়ারে আরার মারি ফেলে দেন হদ্দেরি
When the Arakan army overran Butidang, they emptied its prison. Salaima's husband walked out and came home a few days before Eid.
মোরা হদ্দা দোয়া করে ফিড়া বানাইলে বানা করছে না ফিড়ানো হম ফিড়া হরানি মাগের মতো জিয়লত হদ্দা ফিড়া হরানি মাগেন উতারা উড়ে রইয়ে গোলহার ইনতে মানুষ নেলা দিয়ারা মানুষ যাইতো নদের গরু চল লজার গই খেদায় মাংস চাই সামানা লজার গই আড়াইয়ারে টয়লা আনিয়ারে হ্যাঁ তেন গতি করতে হেড়ে দিন সময় হাড়া দার গই তারাতুন এইলা গোথো হালান শান্তি নাইয়া গোথো হালান দে শান্তি আছে দিয়ে দিন এটা শান্তি হতে হতে আলা কুরবানোর দিন বিন না মানুষ গরু জগরাই আর গুচ্ছ গলাই ন তোরা উতারা হাতে আলো গলে গাই বোম নভরিবার আগত মাল গাঠতে বানে ফেলাই মানে বোম নভরিবার আগত আরা মাল গাঠতে নেয়ালাই দিন উড়ি যাই বললা আরা কোনো বোম মারিব তো আরা শরীর নাই মানে ঘরে ঘরে আই মারিলে মারিব লপাইব নিয়া হ্যাঁ কয় আরা উনটা ও মাথাতে আইতে আইতে আরা ডুরি বস খালে আরে লামি গতি নেলে আই দেশ আমাদের বা উনতে সালর তাই আরে ডুঙ্গুরি বজে দে ডুঙ্গুরি গরম মাদা বনাওয়ালে আরে গোহালালে আরে মুরগি হয় আর গতি হাত ইয়াং গুণা গিয়ে তো সেই তার আরে হে দূরে থেকে আরা গিয়ে আরো কো মারে দেও ওরা ওরে তিন মারে তো আরো কো মারিলা আরে দে যাইব বলে হয় হে তার আরে মরা হলে মরা হে দূরে থেকে গি আর কান ফারা গি তার এর রাত থাকে তারা হেডে বিজি মরা জুন জ্বর ওদের ngure bai rasar halat hotam morer aye data hana golare surata borore de dunji diri de duti Bangladesh tagilam modiria.
As of February 2026, 1,184,864 Rohingya were registered in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh and its surrounding settlements. That number increased by nearly 179,000 in a single year, driven by both continued displacement from Myanmar and by births inside the camps. Children were born inside the camps who had never even been to Myanmar. They're stateless because their parents are stateless. They inherited their legal non-existence the moment they were born.
Bitara dori bitara gora galaji gala area ra bitin her eder ratane rakki rakya ra pusara sar gollo ke alla da yadna ra hodde nila bisha hala tarafen alla da yidi dayaliyo twara asaratamad arare dinamade ke guri aram tarangori bala jaga dilo asaratamade jogo twara mara ram to pus bag diyo do barma jogo twara moga mairo kilo.
The Burmese and Bangladeshi governments have been negotiating the terms of repatriation for the Rohingya for several years. Agreements have been signed, timelines have been announced, but not one has produced a single verified voluntary return. Myanmar has not restored Rohingya citizenship. The 1982 Burma citizenship law is still in force. The conditions that made return impossible in 2017 remain in effect.
There were Rohingyas who were born after their parents fled and then returned. And so their identity remained unrecognized by Myanmar, their ancestral country.
Across northern Rakhine State, the sites of destroyed Rohingya villages were built over. Military bases, security installations, in some areas, commercial infrastructure. The UN-backed investigators and human rights groups said the reconstruction appeared designed to permanently erase Rohingya communities from the landscape. They said that this was the physical removal of evidence that the villages had existed and the creation of facts on the ground that would complicate any future claim to land or return.
But at the end of the day, the Rohingya had no future in Myanmar. And that, I think, was the government decision, and I think that constitutes genocide.
In January 2020, the court ordered provisional measures requiring Myanmar to protect the Rohingya from further harm and to preserve evidence. None of ICC hearings has produced a return. None of them have led to an arrest. None of them have restored a single citizenship. There are words to describe what has happened to the Rohingya. They existed before 2017. So ask the opening question again and listen for where the answer falls.
I don't think national identity as such is the issue. It's the way in which the national community is defined. That's the issue.
How does a government erase a people? Legally, systemically, before anyone raises a hand to stop it. You put it in writing. It happens when a census leaves out certain people. In the word temporary, printed on a card and quietly recalled.
We take a stance. Whether the killers are your own ethnic people or your own co-religionists, Buddhists or Muslims or Christians, you have to identify with humans that are subject to genocide.
The 1982 Burma citizenship law not only stripped the Rohingya of their country, it manufactured a doubt. Are they really from here? Isn't it all more complicated than it looks? The story of the Rohingya did not begin in 2017. By then, years of laws, policies, and discrimination had already stripped away their rights and isolated them from the rest of the country. The violence was the culmination of a process that had been unfolding for decades. That is what a blueprint is, not a single crime, a sequence. Step by step, legal at every step. And no one is allowed to say the word genocide until it is officially recognized. Al Jazeera contacted the government of Myanmar and asked it to respond to allegations made in this film, but they did not reply. However, they continue to deny allegations of genocide in publicly available statements.